Welcome. This presentation will be on the Phoenicians and the Hyperboreans. This video will elaborate more on the ancient Irish connections that I have made in previous videos. This presentation is based and inspired by Michael Tartarian's work, Irish Origins of Civilization. I want to start off by saying that I'm not a scholar. You shouldn't take my words for fact. Just consider the subject matter with deep thought and no judgment. Try to let go of your conceptions of the speaker and also your conceptions of reality. Most of what will be said will be considered out of the norm of traditional mainstream history, but even some people who consider themselves to be alternative researchers still find some of the content I'm presenting hard to believe. The subject at hand really takes critical thinking to connect all the dots. We've been fed lies most of our life, and it's not surprising that we have no idea who we are or where most of our cultures came from. My goal of this presentation is to help start others on their journey of curiosity and critical thinking when it comes to human origins, cosmology, and ancient antiquity. What we have today is a culture who's constantly manipulated by alternative mainstream research. Most people actually believe that ancient aliens on TV is alternative research, when this is obviously propaganda to blind the people who actually think about the subject matter. Ancient Aliens doesn't want you to know our true history. And they definitely don't want you to know the true builders of the pyramids. I mean, come on, this is on the History Channel. With Pawn Stars? Yeah, that ain't real history. I think with that said, we shall begin the presentation. At the end of the day, all I can say is that you must do your own research. The suppression of consciousness. Today, when we look at the majority of the population, what do we see? I mean, can we truly say that we're a culture that understands its past? In Plato's Timaeus, Solon is told by one of the priests in Egypt that they didn't even know where they came from. If the Greeks didn't know where they came from, what does that say about us? Today's people literally are incapable of thinking. We have the masses who are in groupthink, and anyone who thinks outside of the box gets whipped back into shape. America's ruled by corporations, and if corporations can be psychopathic, then what does that say about the media or the education system? It becomes obvious that empires can also become blind with the right to conquest. Why is it so crazy to believe that history can be rewritten? Everyone is in a trance-like state because all of the constant entertainment from every angle. None of us are taught to be masters of the mind, all of our thoughts are out of control, and we have people who suffer from boredom, which is a complete detachment from self-purpose and drive. Everyone's mind is overstimulated on serotonin from social media. Then we have coffee, porn, and unhealthy diets all contributing to the inability to have deep thought. I think it's obvious that we aren't taught to be philosophical or to question the nature of reality. From Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teaching of All Ages. Pythagoras conceived mathematics to be the most sacred and exact of all the sciences, and demanded of all who came to him for a study and a familiarity with arithmetic, music, astronomy, and geometry. He laid special emphasis upon the philosophic life as a prerequisite to wisdom. Pythagoras was one of the first teachers to establish a community wherein all the members were of mutual assistance to one another in the common attainment of the higher sciences. This is what I believe it was like in Tartaria, or Atlantis, or pre-Diluvian times. The higher sciences, philosophy, and the understanding of reality were very prevalent in every individual in that society. We see the complete opposite today. Atlantis and the Deluge. The story of Sumer and the idea that civilization arose in the Middle East but 5,000 years ago is not the true story of civilization. In the Vedas, we have stories talking about how mankind goes back millions of years. We hear of flying ships called Vimanas and stories of ancient wars with high-tech weaponry. Many cultures have myths of floods, and there are many submerged underwater cities that still have a mystery to be solved. Michael Cremo is also a great reference for this idea. He has many books that talk about this idea that the story of civilization and mankind goes way back than we could ever imagine. In this theory, Atlantis was a great continent in the Atlantic, that after some great cataclysm was destroyed. The civilization at the time was very advanced, not just in technology, but in magic and the knowledge of the self. The Atlanteans were said to be sun worshippers, and this makes sense with what the priest said in Plato's Timaeus. Our sciences are hoary with age, meaning they didn't come up with their sciences. It was passed down. Now, a group of the inhabitants of Atlantis avoided the cataclysm and sailed east, where they landed in Ireland and northern Spain. Ireland and Spain used to be one, Hibernia. This is the explanation of where and how civilization came to the east and then to the rest of the world. Atlantis was destroyed, and humanity was scattered and lost around the world, but there was one advanced group containing the knowledge of sun worship and the sciences who landed in ancient Ireland, Spain, and they began their journey to re-educate the world that at the time had been very primitive. From Donnelly's Atlantis. In their great missionary pilgrimage, they circled the globe in order to give religion and knowledge of God to the different races of mankind. They also established priesthoods and gave alphabets to the races who were unenlightened in such matters up to that time. Ireland is the country in which the arts and sciences were first discovered and developed. To this country the Greeks apply the term Olgia, a term which is never given but to the very ancient, and it is from the Irish, Aryans, that the Greeks trace their descent. The Irish Druids, the Aryan race, roots of astrotheology, spreading civilization once again. All that we know about this ancient race comes from the Greeks and the Romans. There is a great site by Bruce Linnell that lists almost all of what the ancient Romans and Greeks said about the Celts. The earliest Greek and Roman authors often referred to Hyperboreans and Cimmerians. Some modern authors consider these to be possible references to Celts. Hyperboreans were originally a mythical sacred race who, often associated with god Apollo, they dwelt at the ends of the earth. The word Hyperborean means beyond the north wind, and lived long lives in peace with themselves and their neighbors. Their legends are later intermingled with British, Northern Celtic, and Germanic cultures by ancient authors. The name Cimmerian has many meanings. To the earliest ancient Greeks, they were a mysterious race who lived in the mist and darkness at the ends of the earth. But later Greek authors clearly described the movements of a group of people they called Cimmerian. Now, I believe the earlier ones knew a deeper truth of a true history that actually happened, and then the later authors were just propaganda authors. If you want to see all the references to Hyperboreans and Cimmerians and what Roman Greek authors talked about, the link is in the description. This is all reference to the Aryan race, but what does Aryan mean? From Michael Tartarian. The name Ireland was originally rendered Ari, or Arya-land, one of the main connotations of the term being Western land. Another was land of the pure, or noble ones. The Druids were Aryans. This word is usually narrowly construed to signify race. However, the term also refers to spiritual caste. It is also the true name of Ireland, correctly rendered Ariland, or land of the Arya. The term can be correctly rendered Iri, signifying the earth goddess of the ancient Druids. Etymologically, Ari and Eri are found in roots and terms and names such as Arya, Tara, Tara, Mari, Hera, Benares, Armenia, Armeric, and aristocracy, etc. Names such as Tara, father of Abram, and the place name Haran in Irish, Haran being synonymous with Aryan. The epithets Iberian, Hibernian, Ibrides, Iberisum, Old Name of New York, and Hebron are equivalent to the Latinized Hyperborean, connoting Ireland and the Arctic homeland. This is the true meaning of Eber, an ancestor of the Israelites. Place name and personal name, Heber and Hebrew. The priest of the Nile, the Eberu, took their name from the illustrious northern western Arya. As the great Anna Wilkes tells us, Hyperborea was unquestionably the lands of the Druid and Bard, whose religion was identical with that of the later Hebrews. The very word for a Druid Bard is equivalent of Boredes or Boreas, meaning north. The Eberu were but one contingent of Westerners living in the Middle East. Related groups were the Luvians and Shemisu Hor, the disciples of Horus. Evidence of their presence has been well and truly suppressed. So this Arya meant a lot to the ancients. And we can also see how Hyperborea is really connected to Ireland and the ancient Irish. We have nations like Syria, Iran, Armenia, all paying homage to these noble peoples who at the top of their society valued things like being moral, spiritual, philosophical, being a full mind, things today we take for granted. The Sanskrit definition of Arya is noble, not ordinary, valuable, precious. This isn't about race or control or power. It's about understanding who we are and our past. Now, here's some mainstream Irish. Here is what Wikipedia says. What is known of pre-Christian Ireland comes from references in Roman writings, Irish poetry, and myth and archaeology. While some possible Paleolithic tools have been found, none of the finds are convincing of Paleolithic settlement in Ireland. Let me give you a hint on why nothing is found. From Connor McDarry. It was held by the leaders of the Roman Church and state, they were practically one, that all power should be centralized in the head of the church, who was also emperor of the state, and any and all religious institutions which in any way conflicted with this ideal were to be done away with. For this reason, the mystery cults were suppressed, and initiation into the ancient or esoteric mysteries where no religious establishment, worship, or practice would exist which would draw and hold men to it other than the Roman state church. And besides, as the study and preparation necessary for those who were selected for initiation into the higher mysteries was such as to develop a highly philosophic and spiritual state of mind, such study and preparation did not comport with the object which the church rulers had in view. Such minds would not yield adherence to a mere political and idolatrous church, whose doctrines were, in the main, intended for the uninstructed multitude. Such minds could not be dominated by a political or mercenary priesthood. They were enlightened men, and they stood in the way of the church project. Therefore, the institutions were produced such. Men were to be suppressed. Now, I believe that there are multiple levels to what we know as Druid. We have the ancient Druids, then we have the Jewish Druids. That will have to be for another video, but keep in mind with some of the stuff that I'll be saying that there's definitely a connection between the Jews here. The ancient Druids were the ancient priests who preserved the wisdom from Atlantis. This is where the source of astrotheology begins. I don't know how many of you guys know about Newgrange, but it's an amazing site. It's older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Giza, and guess what? We see the same thing, a massive structure that is aligned with astrological alignments and symbolism. Newgrange is even more amazing in that it's still perfectly aligned to this day with the winter solstice. From Julius Caesar. As one of their leading dogmas, they include this, that souls are not annihilated, but pass after death from one body to another, and they hold by this teaching, men are much encouraged to valor through disregarding the fear of death. They also discuss and impart to their young many things concerning the heavenly bodies and their movements, the size of the world and our earth, natural sciences, and the influence and power of the immortal gods. Caesar is telling you where Rome and Greece got their knowledge of the planets and gods, and their sciences from. You see all these Greek historians mixing truth with deception. It's the only way to really resonate with the mass of humanity's subconscious. Thus, with a shrewd conception and understanding of policy, Rome gave to the Irish Bible a history and a geography which, through her efforts to give it an appearance of truth, as a record of actual occurrences and facts, have heaped woe and misery upon mankind. To perfect this project, Rome preached and instigated the wars of the Crusades. This was for the express purpose of getting possessions of the countries of the East, and to give names to places in this country called Palestine, or Syria to correspond with the allegorical and cryptic names, Irish names in the Bible, and Irish names they are still to this day. And this is the main reason why the Irish Roman Catholics of our day were not encouraged to read or study the Bible. It was because of this too that the Irish language was mainly suppressed and all but destroyed. To carry out the scheme of keeping the knowledge of these things from the world, Rome has conveniently invented a list of fictitious names which the priests assumed in order to set up authorities supposed to have lived in the periods of time assigned to them, and who would be cited by posterity to verify the falsifications which would have established this fact. Such are the names Herodotus, Manetho, Berosus, Josephus, Irenaeus, Origen, and Eusebius. These historians appear in the light which we have today of her doings as so many fictitious personages to whom to attribute writings which were done by the Roman and British priests of much later times. They were very busy concocting history after the English invasion of Ireland and the conquest of the Irish Church, and right away in the early part of the 13th century they set about altering the Irish Bible to make it their own, by Conor McDarry. The Druids were the last force to resist Rome. This makes sense why we don't understand this part of our past. But the ancients knew about this. That is what the myths of Hyperborea, Atlantis, Lemuria, we all knew that gods came down and gave us knowledge. Now Ancient Aliens is happy making you believe that it's ETs, but I'm gonna go down an alternative route and say that no, we've been cycling in an infinite loop, and every time we become extremely aware or become enlightened beings on this earth, cataclysm strikes. And the Romans decided that they could prevent this from happening by removing all traces of our past and by creating a false history in cosmology and religion, all in combination to put us in historical amnesia, with no capability to use our mind to understand what reality we're in. It's truly a mess. Who are the Celts? Celts have an Indo-European tongue, so mainstream history assumes that the Celts migrated from the Black Sea. They migrated to dominate most of modern Europe, from 1400 BC to 600 BC. They say that they moved to northern Spain and they somehow preserved their culture here, and then they called it Galicia. I find it funny that they say they don't know what it means, when I believe it's a later derivation of Gaul, Gallia. If we look up Gaul in a Gaelic dictionary, it says, a lowlander, a stranger from Gallus, a Gaul, the Gauls being the first strangers to visit or be visited by the Irish in pre-Roman Roman times. Gala, a bitch. Gast, a bitch. G is possibly for gaslit. Pot has deduced Spanish gago, greyhound, which however is founded on Canis Gallicas. If you see my other videos, you would know that this is a common theme in history. When intruders take over, they come in, cause havoc, and then rename the land, the people, and then after a generation or so, the people don't even know where they came from. The people from Galicia are told their origins lie in the Black Sea, when really, some strangers came in and made this land their bitch. Also notice how Galicia has fantastic architecture. From the Odes of Pindar. Summary. Hyperboreans are described by Pindar as an ancient sacred people who worship Apollo and live without illness, old age, or strife. In his Pythian Odes, Pindar says they live in a place which cannot be reached by ships nor land, but in Olympian Odes, he seems to indicate they are associated with the source of the Danube. According to Wikipedia, the Danube was once a long-standing frontier of the Roman Empire. Is Pindar saying that these Hyperboreans moved east and they are the true source of the Danube? I can't find anywhere on Wikipedia saying that this is a man-made river, but if what Pindar says is true, then this once great nation had this river surrounding its entire border? The Celts are not the true original Irish. Plato describes the Celts and Iberians as drunken and warlike. Celts occupied land in modern-day Eastern Europe, Greece, Spain, Northern Italy, Western Europe, England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. The Celtic people have mystified anthropologists and historians for generations. They were a non-literate culture whose history and literature was preserved through oral tradition. The origins of the Celts are shrouded in mystery. I found these quotes from this one article where this researcher was discussing whether the term Celts was even used in Ireland before the 1800s. Whatever about whether the Celts ever did come to Ireland, what is undeniable is that medieval Irish and Welsh writers said absolutely nothing about a Celtic past, nor did they suggest that the Irish and Welsh people had an affinity for one another based on the shared heritage. In other words, before the year 1700, no one called the Irish and Welsh Celts, so where did the idea that we are Celts come from? My own research has shown that the word Celtic rarely appeared in Irish newspaper in the early 19th century. Suddenly, the regularity of its use increased dramatically in the 1840s, it doubled again in the 1850s, and by the 1880s, archaeological excavations in Switzerland and in the 1850s revealed evidence of an ancient Celtic civilization that had once dominated Europe. Over a 20-year period, the Celts were established as a biological fact by scientists, given a glorious past by archaeologists, a sense of scholarly gravitas by linguists, and identifiable personality traits by literatures. This made Celticness attractiveness to nationalists in Ireland and Wales, and by the turn of the 20th century, most people in both countries believed they were Celts. So I'll end with the Celts here, but I want to just basically end with there's definitely a cover-up of a once great nation. And I think the real hint, or what we should be looking towards, is the Hyperboreans. Hyperboreans and Tartaria. The Hyperboreans must be the ancient empire that we are calling Tartaria today. Who else could come to such great knowledge? I would say it's the people who are not dying and living extremely long lives. These Hyperboreans must have a connection to the Irish. It must be that the ancient Greek historians fantasized these ancient peoples to make it seem like a legend. This is what I think. The Irish, after the flood, spread east, and at this time they had advanced technology and advanced spirituality, so much so that they had long lives. The book Natural Magic talks about Tartaria having these large brass wind instruments that would make a pleasing sound for the whole city. This sound, I believe, had a magnetic effect on the body, allowing them to live long lives. These people created these great cathedrals for healing, energy, and learning. I think at this time the ancient Hyperboreans, or Irish, had spread out to all around the world, mixing with multiple cultures. Let's look at this map again. I believe these massive cities were generations after the Hyperboreans spread out to East Russia, India, Africa, And from here, I'm positive that a variety of different cultures sprung and mixed. I think that the Celts, after the Cataclysm, were different confused tribes that were spread out all over Europe and the Middle East. Myths arose talking about the mythical origins of this great empire, and that is why these tribes made their way back to Hibernia, or ancient Ireland. These savage, barbaric tribes, as portrayed by the Greeks, are what mainstream history says the Irish came from. Not just that, most of Europe. When the truth is, it's lies mixed with truth. These invading tribes back into the homeland probably did take a lot from the native culture, and that is why this lie works, because there is a similarity, but nonetheless, the ancient Aryans or Hyperboreans were not savages. So why is it that we have been fed this lie? Well, the Phoenicians are this Hyperborean race. The Phoenicians are just a cover name for these Hyperboreans as they spread east through the generations. This also got mixed with other tribes, so there's a lot of confusion. This explains why the Phoenicians were so advanced and where they got their writing system from. Not only that, but where they got their knowledge of architecture. Phoenicians and the Hyperboreans. Until the late 1800s, most of the info on the pre-Hellenistic Eastern Mediterranean came from the Hebrew Bible. The glory of the Phoenicians is in the Bible. They are claimed as ancestors by snooty Lebanese, and they were ancient millionaires who shipped purple dye and cedar wood to the world's wealthy. Phoenicia.org. Let me repeat this quote. They also established priesthoods and gave alphabets to the races who were unenlightened in such matters up to that time. Ireland is the country in which the arts and sciences were first discovered and developed. To this country, the Greeks applied the term ogia, a term which was never given but to the very ancient, and it is from the Irish Aryans that the Greeks traced their descent. In mainstream history, the Greeks got their language from the Phoenicians. To me, this is some type of distraction from the real origin. They want you looking to the Mediterranean for the origins of the Greeks. I can tell you why. It has something to do with the Jews, but that has to be for another video. Quote, the first thing to clarify when it comes to the Israelites concerns the origin of the name Israel. This name was not original to the people mentioned in the Bible, whose center was Jerusalem. None of the cities of the Hyksos pharaohs and their people bear the title Israel. The term originated with the Irish and with the Phoenicians, who had erected prominent and sophisticated cities all over Eastern Europe, Asia Minor, and the Levant. The Phoenicians were originally of Irish extraction, and they had some of their most important bases in Ireland and Scotland. Not only were the Phoenicians expert sailors, but they made good use of land bridges that once existed between Scandinavia and England, and between England and Ireland. Michael Tartarian. The Phoenicians were indeed extraordinarily gifted men. They were one of the first races to devise and employ a sophisticated alphabet, construct great cities and temples, make paper for writing, and sail the seas of the world. The fact is, they were the Arya, or adepts of the highest order. They were master architects, astrologers, shipwrights, mariners, healers, and scientists. We believe the Phoenicians were, like the Scythians, originally from the West. They preserved the secrets of the megalithic construction and many other ancient arts. They may have been the original builders of many temples along the Nile. This is what the Old Testament hints, and what a great deal of miscellaneous Masonic literature suggests. Quote, as our scholars have failed to see the difference between Israel and Jews, they have completely confused the issue, and when they speak of ancient Hebrew, they mean Phoenician. The oldest Hebrew manuscripts date from AD 489, is a roll and was found in the Karaite synagogue in the Crimea. The Targum's version of the Old Testament does not date any earlier than the Babylonian captivity of the Jews, and it was written in the Aramaic Chaldee language, and even of that version there is not BC in existence. So when our scholars speak of the ancient Hebrew of the Israelites, they mean Phoenician evidently. For they never have seen it written on any scroll, only on the Salam inscription, the Moabite stone, and the Phoenician engravings of the East, the Mediterranean, southern Russia, and Europe, particularly in Britain. The early Phoenicians were known to have referred to themselves and their kings by the term Got or Goat, signifying goats. This is where we derive the words God and good, and where place names such as Gotland and Goatburg, etc. come from. The Goths were called the Goths by the Romans. These Caucasian Goths considered horned animals such as stags and goats to be sacred symbols of their people and gods. This goes with what Moon was saying about the ram in Tartaria Part 1 and the connection to Egypt. Quote, it was they, Phoenicians, and not the Israelites who were the creators of the alphabet, the great temple builders and the world's finest seafarers, astronomers, and adepts. What they still hesitate to accept is the Irish origins of Phoenicians. This fact has been obscured due to the geographical dispersion of the Phoenicians. As we have said, the dispersion was a necessity after the Age of Catastrophe. In summary, I do not think that the ancient Irish or the Hyperborean peoples should be considered Celt. The term Celt has been used for many things to imply that the ancient Irish came from the Black Sea and were olive-skinned thousands of years ago. I'm not buying it. The Hyperboreans are the true builders of these amazing buildings and are the source of where we should look in the origins of the Tartaria conspiracy. The people that we know today as the Phoenicians are these Hyperboreans many generations after spreading east. Let me also clarify on what I'm not saying. The Tartars are not the Irish. I'm saying that they have their origins in the Irish or the ancient Hyperboreans. Great Tartaria must have been a product of these people. If you watched my last video, I talk about Phoenicians, churches, sound vibration, and high tech. And I honestly think that these Hyperboreans are connected to all that. They didn't die, they lived in peace, they had great wisdom. I think these are all attributes that lead to an advanced civilization. And then, it was stolen. I think this stuff is important because if we open our mind and try to imagine this as a possibility, then what does it say? Can we learn to do this again? Can we learn to heal our bodies? Master our minds? Master reality? What if we could live for hundreds of years? And don't say it's crazy, because when you think that, what it really means is that deep down you have a foundation of what reality is, meaning you truly believe it to be a certain way. And the reason you think this is so crazy is because it would mean that reality is not what you thought it was. Well, I'm willing to argue that none of us really have a clue what reality is. We should really let go and just research, trust our intuition, and work with others to come to a conclusion, because otherwise, we are just perpetuating the Dark Ages. Well, thanks for watching, and let our minds be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?